100 years of Leeds United.
There's been a lot of really good books so far this year around Leeds United centenary. I have with me an author, Dave Tomlinson. Leeds Money and Misery Me is the title of his book. Dave, why is your book different?
Well, I'm always going to say it's different from the rest. Every author will say that, but I think it really is different. What I've tried to do is try and take a objective stance to what's happened around the cash and the money and the people that influence things going on here. So if you look at it, there's two themes in here. It's the fantastic support and what's happened over the last 25 years. Now people are stuck through that, even in the third division, versus these people who've had power and abused trust. And they've been trying to do the right things. No one would argue that they didn't make a difference, but because they haven't had a balancing view, they've taken us down some pretty ropey avenues. But all the way through that, it's taken the fans along, and they've really stood by this club over the last 25 years. This club could have gone out of business 2007. I remember, very day when I was hearing about this. I was away in London at the time, but you get this story, it could be over tomorrow. And I'm just sitting there thinking, okay, what do I do the next day? This is my life and other people's life. And it's that thing about, if you haven't got a football club, what do you do? So you haven't got an alternative. You can go to another club, but it's not the same. So for Leeds United fans, it's very much, they've been with this club all their life. They wouldn't dream of going anywhere else. They wouldn't dream of even wearing red. And it's the passion you get. And I remember playoff semi-finals this last year against Derby. We were virtually there. There's never been a club top at Christmas that hasn't gone up. Well, we knew that was going to happen. There hasn't been a club won the first leg away in the playoff semi-finals and didn't get through. We did. I remember sitting before the game, talking to this guy that was going really through the mill at Norwich. He's working at Norwich now, and he gets all the local fans having a go at him or whatever. And he knew he'd come there, and he knew it was going to go bad. We starts off the game 1-up. Fantastic. Should have been there. But it's like Leeds United always does this. Remember coming up to half-time, everybody, certainly I thought the half-time whistle had gone, but they scored. And it's then a real low at half-time, a real desperate low, blaming the keeper, blaming Cooper, loads of stuff. Then it starts, you get this fantastic set of fans. We could have died a death there, and it was just really awe-inspiring. I remember, and I've got a video of it, my wife took a video of me there. I was crying my eyes out, not because it was going bad, but it's just the sheer emotion. They picked the players off the ground, and then Derby scored again, and it was off again, and it was up, straight away. And then when Dallas scored at the end, this could have been it, but we fell apart, and it was the old thing. Berardi lost his rag. Referee against us all the way through, and you'd still got, at the end of all this, the amount of applause and people staying there. And some of these players, you get mercenaries in games, but there's nobody that's been at Leeds that hasn't been touched by it. And really it's about trying to get that passion, but at the same time getting this bit about the story of the money and what happened there and how it could have been different, but it hasn't been.
Some will say, well, what's the point of highlighting history? Now, we'll all have our own view, but if you've put 23 mistakes that should not have been made or have been done different, if you like, why is that important for us to revisit those or think, well, hang on, what's the alternative?
I think there's two ways to look at this. So the standard is, if that hadn't happened, life would have been wonderful. It's never like that. So some of these things are traced through, actually, could have been very, very different. So they didn't spend big. What that would have meant was, so when O'Leary was around, it would have meant that they were mid-table Malays. They'd never have tilted at glory, but they'd been a Charlton, they'd been safe in the Premiership, and that's not what football's about. Football's about highs and lows and having enemies and bitter rivals. And it's going through, actually, those 23 mistakes, even if they'd not happened, it would have still been a different outcome that's not necessarily what we'd have wanted. So if Strachan had took over or O'Neill had took over, it would have been a very different club. And it might have been in Premiership the last 20 years. But I think football's about glory and glory for the fans. And going through this, when we're in the third division, winning at Old Trafford, when we shouldn't have done. Everyone knew we shouldn't have done. And they got a decent side out, Man United then. And they screwed it up, but it wasn't they screwed it up. We won that. Same as in 92 when Ferguson said they lost it. We won that. And it's just about the relationship between the fans and the club and how these people have done stuff to this club and took us off track. But all the way through that, you've had the best fans, my opinion, and it will say this, best fans in Europe for the commitment, for the support. And just the loyalty going through that and just the passion. It's just this thing at the end of the season, the playoffs. I've never felt like that. And he asked me about it the next day. And it was the best day of my life and it was the worst day of my life. But I just felt that that's why I joined up. That's why other people join up. And it's not even a choice about joining up. It happens to you. You're born Leeds. And you can't change it.
No, I think you're right. And you've talked there about people taking over the club or having a significant impact on the club, from a financial point of view. And you say, look, by and large, with the best intentions, but you also do talk about an abuse of trust. So how has that made you feel and how has that manifested itself as a supporter as well?
Well, I go through... I'm a director in the NHS, so I understand some of this. I understand the bit about non-execs balancing my power. I understand the need for that. But I also understand that if you want to do something, you have to take risks. You have to push boundaries. You have to really know what you're doing and be very clear when you need to take the lead. But at the same time, you've got to have balance. So you go through this part in. When Ridsdale was chairman, they had Alan Leighton really respecting the city as a vice chairman. Richard North, who came from Bass, had been through problems in the market. And you wonder why these people couldn't see what they were doing was wrong. So this thing in terms of player lease back, etc., is all on the basis that there's only one way the market would go. Look what happened to house prices. They didn't believe it could go bad. Their only contingency was, we'll flog all the players. Well, it's a bit rich if you don't even own them. How's that going to work? So you think back. These guys aren't stupid. They're all PLC, senior people. How did they let that happen? How didn't they ask the questions? Or did they? And what stopped them taking an alternative course going through? And the media's has got something to blame in here, because I remember seeing articles at the time. Caspian had taken this club over in the mid-90s, and they were doing slow and steady. And the papers were saying, you need to push the boat out. And I think Ridsdale heard that. O'Leary also went into that. And when they went to the opposite extreme. And it's this thing about, actually, they got this thing where they got some really good strikers. They got Viduka and Smith, and they bought Fowler. They bought Keane. How are you going to fit these players into it? And it just felt a bit of a vanity. And it's all the way through. It's the ego. And what that does to you, because this is my club, not yours. And we're all Leeds, aren't we? Well, I'm not sure we all are. But it goes through. You can forgive people if they say sorry. And it's just the arrogance of, they never said sorry. Ridsdale never said sorry. Bates would never say sorry.
GFH, Cellino, how do you feel about them in the same terms? I
remember 2012, the Toma thing, when there was all this talk about the buyout and Dare to Dream and all that stuff going on, and we thought we were going to be bigger than Manchester City. I remember on the Wacko fans website, all that stuff coming through every day. You're going to get this imminent stuff's going to happen, and you talk and you hear about what David Haig said, some things that are going on. They didn't know what they were doing. They did have a big backer and he moved away, but it was almost self-fulfilling prophecy, and it got through. I think we needed someone like Cellino coming across to actually sort out the financial mess after the event. But you get this thing, he's been talked about. Actually, you don't cure the patient by cutting the head off. Actually, they survive the other side, but you go through this period, you get all these Italians in, you get people like David Hockaday. Who the hell's he? So I think it's around, they made a difference. I really worry about GFH because the expectations were raised. It wasn't so much what they did, is what they promised to do. And after all this stuff, all the years with Bates, people really believed it was going to be different, but they pinned the house on it. And then when it went off, they had a real problem. Initially, with Cellino, they hated him. I remember when they were coming down to Ellen Road trying to get him out when he sacked McDermott and all that period. And over a period of time, that changed, it improved. And eventually, I think everyone was unanimous. He needed to move on. But I think some of these things, he really cared about this club. Really did care about it. He put massive money in. He did the same thing at Cagliari and etc. But he really put his heart and soul in. Now, you can't say he was financially the best guy in the world, and some of the things he did and some of the off-field antics with the league, etc., reminiscent of Bates. So there's nobody perfect here. But I felt really he had this club at his heart, and he wanted to do something. He did the mixing with the fans, etc. But again, he was very ego-driven. He made no bones about it. When he came in, I run the bus. I'm the manager. I don't need a manager. And actually going through, well, McDermott wasn't a manager, he was a coach. If anyone had just told him that, rather than he manages, you might have had a very different view. You had Adam Pearson came in. And for a period of time, that balanced it really, really well. So you got some of these really good periods, but then it's constantly gone off.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's almost like the Leeds bug. So when they had this gypsy curse, it feels like that's been there forever. So being a Leeds fan, real highs, real lows, but always there.
And just finally, Dave, in your book, Leeds Money and Misery Me, you've got, obviously all this will be covered. So where are we now? In your opinion, having looked back over the last sort of quarter of a century, if you like, where do you feel they are from your point of view? I mean, coming obviously as a very passionate fan, but looking at an owner that obviously also has an ego, but there's been a lot of good things and there have been mistakes as well. So how do you feel about now?
Well, I feel incredibly optimistic. I was worried when they got in Christensen, but it went okay. And then they went to Higginbottom, and you think, God, this is going to be the same as it's always been. And then we got Bielsa. And nobody knew who he was. They all say they did. All this thing about having all these disciples and people like Pochettino and Guardiola mentoring them. No one knew who he was. He might have been at Chile, but no one knew about him. How they identified him and then persuaded him to come. And the difference he made this last year, the difference he made, and what would have happened if he'd have walked away at the end of the season. And it was almost like, didn't care about the players, didn't care about, not buying, because we've got this man that will take us somewhere. We've got this man that plays with 13, 14 players. You've got this massive squad, and they're all out on loan, and you go through. Same squad from the year before. Fantastic. The football they're playing now, and you do get rose-tinted spectacles, but football they played the other night at Reading, they got a lot of slagging off for that. But this is fantastic club. I remember 4 or 5 years ago with Warnock, this hoofball stuff. We're in a different league to what it was before. And frankly, to be honest, I don't care if we don't go up or we stay down. This, sometimes you want to stay at your level. You get up to the Premiership, what's going to happen? They're going to spend loads of money. It changes the nature, potentially. So part of me wants to stay here and be massive, but part of me knows that we need to get back up to really operate at the right level. So I feel really, really optimistic about the future. But I know it's going to be a dodgy season. I know that.
Where can we get the book then? Leeds Money and Misery Me.
Okay. Well, I've just been this morning with a guy called Philip Howard, who runs Philip Howard Books at Roundhay, and I've left a number of books with him at the minute. He's a really good guy. He does some interesting stuff. But if you're interested, I'd go over there. There's signed copies down there. I'm always happy to be contacted about copies, but this is about just getting stuff out, getting a story out. So I'm going to publicise it on YouTube, etc.
Leeds United at 100.